Good evening folks, Silver here. Today's story follows a young man discovering Pokemon for the first time, albeit under some unusual circumstances. What circumstances, you might ask? Let's find out. Also, before we begin, only a small percentage of you that listen to these stories are actually subscribed. So, if you end up enjoying this narration, please consider subscribing. It's free and you can always unsubscribe later. With that, enjoy the story. I had recently become vaguely interested in Pokemon, seeing all these stories on the internet where the ghost from Lavender Town could kill the Pokemon, rather than making it faint, and having it for the entire game. Or perhaps the one where Red, the main character of the original Pokemon games, talked about his fame, and got angry about being demoted from main character to final boss. These scary stories, or what were now called Creepypastas, took up my afternoons each day. With each new story, I became more and more fixated on this idea that I'd been missing out something great throughout my childhood. And while I knew these stories only existed through rumors and hacked games, still, I figured that it wouldn't hurt to try out the Pokemon universe like other people in my generation had. When the curiosity had gotten so strong that I couldn't wait another moment to play one of these games, I decided to ask my friend, we can call him Bill for privacy reasons. I asked Bill if he happened to have a copy of Pokemon that I might be able to loan for a few weeks, maybe until I could afford a used one or something. Immediately after asking him, his face turned pale, a sickly colour of white that I'd never seen on him before, even after all years of knowing him. Finally, with a stammer, he admitted to having one copy, but he said that it was old, and that he doubted I would very much enjoy it. Still, I was persistent and kept asking him to loan me the copy. Even after all this, it never dawned on me that something might be wrong here, and slowly, I was wearing Bill down. Eventually, he gave up, with a deep and heavy sigh that signaled defeat. He looked around to make sure no one else was looking before he rushed inside of his house. I could hear things being rustled around from the upstairs window that was left open. The weather had been pretty nice, so I'm sure Bill left his window open to get some air. Still, it seemed like he was going through an awful lot of trouble just to get to a little game. There were things being tossed about, sounds of locks clicking. I wasn't sure, but still, it took a good 15 minutes for Bill to find the game before he ran downstairs and just threw it at me. I barely managed to catch it and was about to mutter my thanks when Bill hurriedly says, "I'm very busy at the moment. Sorry." That's when he slammed the door and locked it behind him. Now it finally dawned upon me that something was really bothering Bill. And whether or not it concerned me or the game, I wasn't sure at this point. So, on my way home, I took out my cell phone to call him. Well, I attempted to call him. He didn't answer. The phone would ring once and then just go straight to voicemail. What the hell, Bill? You give me a game then start acting like a jackass. It wasn't the nicest voicemail in the world, but I was only speaking my mind. Oh well, it's not like it had come as too big of a surprise. Bill had been acting weird of late anyways, and it would seem he was only getting weirder day by day. It had started about 2 weeks prior to my visit. Normally a very talkative guy and overly kind, he just stopped talking to people. He locked himself inside the house all day long and avoided as much human contact as possible. And I figured that it was an early life crisis or something. I'd tried talking with his mother a few days back, but she didn't have anything new to say about the situation. She barely seemed to notice the difference at all. All she kept saying was that Bill was very busy, but I couldn't wrap my head around what could have had him so occupied. But anymore, I could care less. I had just entered a relationship with a really nice girl who lived a few blocks down from me. I had a part-time job which gave me some extra cash to play with when I didn't need to buy anything important. And, for someone my age, I was living the good life. I happily strolled home with the game in hand. I set the game down on my dresser for the time being. After all, I still had the rest of the week to play. 3 days later though, my girlfriend left me. I don't know. It was the typical stuff. I didn't really listen to her. I never wanted to go out. We were too different. Blah blah blah. I tried phoning Bill as this had put a damper on my mood, but even after 3 days without seeing me, he was still ignoring me like an asshole and behaving in a rather odd fashion. I tried to act as though I didn't care about the breakup, as I laid back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. That's when I remembered about the game. I rummaged through my dresser until I found it. After I'd retrieved the game from its hiding place, I was excited just to put it in my Nintendo DS to play. I had determined that This had to be Ruby because of the red cartridge, but otherwise, the label was scratched up like a 4 or 5-year-old had gotten their hands on it and tore the poor sticker off. There were some places that the label had been left intact because of the glue, but barely. After putting the game into the DS that I'd gotten for Christmas the year before, I decided to watch the opening scene in order to fully identify the game. That, and I used it as a way to get pumped because I knew I was bound to be playing this game for hours on end. I watched as the Game Freak logo loaded. The screen stuck for a few seconds. The music that had begun to play just stuck on a low, very irritable note. I thought that the game had frozen, but when I went to turn the power off to try the cartridge again, the screen faded to black and the Pokemon screen came up. But that's just the thing. There was no cutscene, no trainers, no Pokemon. It was just the logo, and it just said, Pokemon. So, I was stuck with a glitched up copy of Pokemon. It was probably just another hack. That's why Bill wanted to get rid of it. He knew that games like this were illegal, and threw it at me to wash the dirt off of him. I laughed so hard as I thought I'd finally put the pieces together. Of course Bill would have been scared over something as small as this, but now my blood was racing faster than it ever had before. A hack? What could it be? Maybe I'd play in all the regions. That'd be cool. You know, 6 or 7 games all in one. Can't really beat that. Then again, what if it was like those other hacks that I'd read about online? Even better. My hands were trembling so hard, as I was just a start button away from this crazy new adventure. So, without wasting another second, I booted it up. When the game loaded the opening cutscene of the professor of the region, the screen was black for about a minute or so. Now I really was starting to think the game had froze. I actually did turn it off once before I realised otherwise. Then, a white text box appeared. What's your name? Odd. I'd thought that maybe a menu would have popped up first. Bill had owned the game before me, and I'll admit, I was curious to see what his progress was in the game. Even if it started a new game for me, I thought I was supposed to sit through some long introduction, choose my gender or some shit first, and then it would ask me my name. Then again, this was a hacked game. They didn't always follow the rules. What the hell? I thought with a shrug. I put in a random name off the top of my head. It's not like it mattered, but I tried making it something funny rather than using my real name, because why not? That's what these games were about, right? After I'd submitted the name, another text box where the first one had originally been appeared. That's not your real name, Randall. My eyes widened. I wasn't scared at this point, but more or less shocked that such a simple game could know my actual name. The text screen opened up again to let me input my name, so, with curiosity nagging at me to continue, I input my real name this time. R-A-N-D-A-L. End. The screen seemed to freeze once more, faded in a bit, but stopped and loaded for a second. And finally, the text screen came back with a new set of questions that were programmed into the game. Are you a boy? Me, being the smart ass that I was, put no as my answer. I tried to press submit, but the option never went away. Instead, another text screen appeared below and said this: Quit lying to me, Randall. The box stayed on the screen until at least I switched the option to yes and pressed submit. The option box went away. The screen took one more fade to black. And finally, I was able to actually play the game. Having watched many YouTube tutorials about the game beforehand, I knew at this point, after leaving your designated house, you're supposed to go into the tall grass. Normally what would happen is, you'll attempt to go into the grass and then your Pokemon professor will call after you, run up to you, and explain how it's too dangerous to be out in the grass without your own Pokemon, etc. Then, he or she takes you back to their lab, you pick your Pokemon, and the rest is pretty much history. So naturally, my first stop was to the tall grass right outside my in-game hometown. Only there was something odd. No one chased after me. There was no cinematic. It was just my sprite, walking through the tall grass with no Pokemon. Nothing. I was starting to think that there were no Pokemon in this area, until my screen flashed. I heard the battle music playing, and a wild Pokemon had appeared. But I had no Pokemon. I started to freak out a bit. I looked like an idiot standing there with nothing to battle the Pokemon. My only options were fight and run, and when running proved useless, I had no choice but to fight. The fighting option didn't open a panel of moves, rather the following dialogue displayed. Randall used Struggle. Randall is hit with recoil. I watched as my poor sprite flashed red and black, showing that it was taking massive amounts of damage from the Pokemon at the attempts at Struggle. I had just noticed that my sprite now had a HP bar, and it was getting incredibly low. Finally, as my sprite neared its final legs in battle, a text box appeared, similar to before. It knew that I was going to die, because it merely said, "Not yet. Sorry, but I can't let you do that, Randall." Before the battle ended in my sprite's grim death, I was warped to the professor's lab where he began the normal dialogue and things he would say for this particular area. But things were becoming odder still, as instead of saying, "Pick out your Pokemon, go and choose one," the hacker had replaced the text with this: "Pick your slave." That was a bit sick and twisted, wasn't it? Pokemon as slaves? I knew that the various teams around the game tended to use Pokemon as tools, but this was something completely different. Everything I'd shrugged off at this point, but slowly, the game was starting to get to me. Either way, I swallowed really hard and decided to try keep playing. I picked Mudkip for my starter. I had decided earlier that I was most likely going to choose the water type because they got great reviews online. But the game said, no. Alright, I tried to pick one of the other two Pokemon available, and still, the game said no. So what the hell was I supposed to do? I thought that maybe there was something I'd forgotten to do, maybe talk with one of the villagers or something. Sometimes games can be finicky like that, and so I decided to leave the professor's lab. As soon as the screen faded to show that my sprite was outside, another text box appeared, and the sound that plays when you receive an item went off. Randall received Burnett. Awesome! I'd heard of games like this. Creepy Black had a patch where you got a start choice of Articuno, Moltres or Mewtwo, so this was nothing new as far as hacks go. I was actually starting to feel like this would make the game more interesting. Starting with a ghost Pokemon, that is. And so, I pressed on. I could finally go into the woods now that I had something to battle with. And I noticed right away that the game decided to give me some odd Pokemon in the tall grass. Things like a Wailord or a Relicanth on land. High level Pokemon that were easy to catch and were on the outside of their normal area. I was starting to figure that this game was made for fast progression, so again I pressed on. It took me no time to make it to the first gym leader, and I won. Easily. Second gym? Done. Easy. But the third gym leader? I could tell had been altered in some kind of way. The pixels were really blotchy and badly coded. The creature standing before me did not have any sort of solid shape or colours, so I couldn't make out exactly what it was. But weirder than that still, in the chat dialogue, the name that appeared for the person or creature was God. When speaking to God, it asked if I wanted to play a little game, and then the option box appeared. Oftentimes gym leaders ask silly questions or have strange dialogue to initiate a challenge, so, naturally aching for this strange glitch in the system, I picked yes and pressed submit. Immediately the battle began, and I sent out my Burnett, level 33. God's first Pokemon that he sent out was a Pikachu. It had normal pixels, except that the level had been blurred out so that it came up as unknown. Still, my Burnett was able to take it down without a problem. The second Pokemon that God sent out to fight me was a Weavile. Same deal. Unknown level. Burnett took it down with no problem. Then, the third Pokemon that God sent out was himself. His text was now menacing, a deep colour of red as he said, "Kill me, and I'll kill you." Something inside me just stopped. For a moment, it was like I'd quit breathing and was frozen with terror. Did he mean my sprite? Was he talking about the real me? Not wanting to gamble it, I let him kill Burnett. After losing the battle to him, as I was not given the option to send out any of my other Pokemon after this, God's avatar quivered in what seemed like a twisted sense of joy. Fresh meat. Gross. I'd never thought of anyone eating Pokemon before. Then again, I guess it actually might make sense. Still, the thought of him ripping into my Burnett sent shivers down my spine, especially since it was a ghost-type Pokemon. Where was the nutritional value in that? It was in that moment after the battle that the DS died. I thought that the battery had been fully charged, but obviously, I was mistaken. I could have just plugged it into the wall and continued to play. I had saved the game right before the battle with God, and even though I did not want to repeat it, I would have tried if I wanted to progress. Still, I had played enough for one day, so I just carried on about my usual business when things were slow, and soon fell asleep while watching a documentary. I had a dream that night about Burnett getting devoured by that thing, or God I guess I should say. I woke up with a start, but I managed to sleep the whole night. Because I never saved after the gym battle, I turned on the DS, it had been charging overnight, and sighed with relief when Burnett was still in my party. Only, when I took a closer look at it, something wasn't right. The Pokeball that was next to the Pokemon sprite had been crossed out. The status of my Burnett was not okay, not fainted. It was eaten. Again, remembering the dream, I began to shiver. I was guessing that the cartridge had some sort of autosave feature. Still, now I had to go get another Pokemon if I was trying to face God one more time. Then again, did I really want to? I blame it on my age and naivety that hits around that time because eventually I answered my own question by going out and finding a level 50 Zangoose. I returned back to the gym and challenged God with the same dialogue as before. Only this time, instead of sending out his other two Pokemon, God only sent out himself. And again, he had the same dialogue. Kill me, and I'll kill you. Again, my nerves got the best of me. I let him win again, and this time he said this. This one will go nicely with Spoink. By now, I was wondering if God was just programmed to say these things, but maybe Spoink was the victim of another person who had owned this game and did not dare to challenge God. Maybe the Spoink belonged to Bill. Trying to figure this out, I approached God to try and speak with him again, and the damn DS decides to freeze up on me. This seemed to be a regular pattern whenever I came across this God person. He was never to be bothered twice in one day. Still, I laid down and played everything through my head. The text boxes and their knowledge of my real world identity, God's appetite for Pokemon flesh. It was all very disturbing. I tried to contact Bill and ask him about it, maybe ask him if he had a Spoink. But the phone just rang and rang. It didn't even go to voicemail. He might have shut it off since I cursed him last time. I even tried to research it online to see if anyone had posted up this hack before. Maybe had even written a Creepypasta about it. But there was nothing to be found. Finally, when I looked up at the clock, it was 5 in the morning. I had spent all night trying to find answers to no avail. I really need to sleep some more. I was hesitant to close my eyes at first, but eventually I drifted off. I had another dream about the game, only this time, it was Zangoose being chopped into sizable pieces and placed on a wooden panel next to the remainders of what appeared to be a Spoink head. God was the one doing the slicing, and when he turns around to face me, the weapon still in his hand, he stabs me with that same knife that he used in order to cut up Zangoose. Again, I'm startled awake. I jolted up and out of bed, and that's when I felt the sharp pain that was in my side. I lifted up my shirt to see that there was a stab wound there. No blood pouring out of it, just a clean cut, and it wasn't very deep, thank goodness. I tried to look at it a little closer, perhaps inspect it more deeply to make sure there wasn't anything peculiar about it, no Zangoose hair or anything. But the pain, and just the look of the wound mixed with the shock from my dream, just caused me to pass out. This time in the dream, God was on top of me, stabbing me in my chest. I wake up and I have more holes in me, blood soaking through my shirt. I tried to stand up to no avail. I pass out again. I'm guessing I should have killed that bastard when I was given the chance. But now, I will never wake up again. By now you're wondering how I'm telling you this tale when I'm apparently dead. No one ever talks about the dead press. Local boy found dead. 15-year-old Randall Smith was found dead in his bedroom, headless, by his mother late last night. The boy was found decapitated with a knife in his hand and several stab wounds to the body. Police have started their investigation, even though they seriously are discussing the claim that it was suicide. 2 weeks later, we have found a house with the now supposed murdered boy's head. It was placed atop a wooden mantle with the remains of 2 animals that cannot be identified and might not even be known to science. No arrests have been made at this time.